one final match to close out the HGC weekend here in North America. It's Tempo Storm versus Superstars. One that on paper you would look at and say, oh, it should be a Tempo Storm victory, but Lag Force getting 2 games off of Tempo Storm and looking dominant there calls into question what this series will look like.
I'm going to throw in a fatty asterisk on that one real quick. 2 games to Lag Force with a sub. And
yeah.
With a sub, Leon Black.
Leon Black.
Who I still haven't figured out who Leon Black. I still have no idea who he is. Granted, I'll be honest, I never went out of my way to look into it, but I do not know. I have not heard the name other than the performance he had with Lag Force, and that was against Tempo Storm. So now, suddenly, what do you say out of Superstars? And again, then when looking at Superstars gauging and their scope of skill level, Sray factor coming back online. We no longer have Daihu with us with the subbing, and it just goes, you know, how good are Superstars? We have really no idea. It does seem like it's going to be a really difficult series for them, but again, it feels like anything can happen for North America.
I am on board with keeping Leon Black as the absolute legend. He just fades off into the mist now. We'll never know where he came from, and we'll never know where he went. But it's probably back to HGC Open Division. We got to check into that. Let's check out the standings after the win for Team Freedom over Gale Force Esports. Oh, man. Team Freedom has beaten Gale Force Esports twice now, which means if they get into this situation, there is no head-to-head keeping Gale Force Esports in the game between the two of them, which is why we see Team Freedom the #2 position in standings.
Yeah, that isn't a questionable. Can Gale Force overcome? Like, obviously, all the still standings and results matter, but this does mean that if they tie, Team Freedom is second over Gale Force Esports because they have won both times. The head-to-head very much in favor of Team Freedom. So that was devastating. That means Gale Force Esports, in a matter of, it's been under 24 hours, or rounding about 24 hours, went from first place to third place seed with a 2-game deficit over the people below them. That is absolutely a colossal setback in momentum. Yeah,
that's giant for Team Freedom. Gale Force Esports had a rough weekend this weekend, but they still have 3 series left to recover. Let's check out the schedule for today one last time. As you can see, if you missed it, we had Team Liquid defeat Playing Ducks, keeping themselves out of the Crucible, then Team Expert losing 0-3 to Fnatic. Team Freedom did win 3-1 in the last series, so we're moving on to Superstars versus Tempo Storm. Now, Superstars now is 1 game less of wins to Lag Force because Lag Force got those 2-game wins against Tempo Storm. So they need at least 2-game wins to switch back in their favor, the standings.
Yeah, and it's going to be very important for them to concentrate on managing to get that. And, you know, it's only convenient that Tempo Storm has been the team for both of them, right? Because we got that last week, Lag Force was the one to push it to Game 5, and that was where they got the 2-game lead. So now it's like Superstars. It's legitimately as equal of a trial as it could be. Just a day different. Go up against Tempo Storm. What can you make happen? Can you get the 2 wins as well to deserve to tie up? I think it's really nice that it's convenient just against the exact same opponent.
Yeah, I think it's been a lot of fun to keep track of the games and the series from them. But let's get into the series now and hear from Fury and Iacona their thoughts on the importance of this match.
For this weekend, the changes you expect to see is we're most likely putting Airho back on tank. We experimented with it a little bit of having him as the main tank and shot caller for the early game, and we put Daihu a few times in the offlane, and we felt like it had some potential, so we're wanting to experiment with that more and see how far it can take us. I honestly have no idea what's going on with Tempo Storm. Some weeks they look really strong, kind of back in their old days like a year ago or so when they were the dominant team, and some days they just don't look like any semblance of the team. So I honestly have no idea what's going on with them. It seems almost like a coin flip if it's going to be a good week or a bad week for them. So hopefully we get the bad week.
Right now, I think Superstars' biggest chance to taking games off us would be having to cheese us. Because I think if they just play standard versus us, I think we have the better standard. So they have to play kind of different comps. I don't know, maybe like a Mass Global or something like that. Something we're not really used to, like with Zagara. But if they draft standard comps versus us, I think we'll have the edge over this team. So the last 2 weeks with Superstars, they've been using substitute Daihu instead of Sray. I'm not sure why, but they seem to still do well even with the substitute, so that was good to see. And now with Sray coming back, we're kind of concerned and wondering like if they're going to be stronger or weaker since they haven't been playing with their main player for 2 weeks. But we'll definitely, you know, respect them as if like Stray was there the whole time. And yeah, I think their strongest player, and I'm not sure if he's leading the team, but Yoda for sure is definitely a player you need to respect, mainly on his Dahaka and Leoric. So playing against them will be interesting. I'd say it's not going to be that easy, but you never know. We'll see, you know, if they show up with Stray.
Superstars versus Tempo Storm. Superstars needing those game wins, but I'm really excited to get into the battlefield. But I guess we can't get into the Battleground just yet. Let's start with the changes that both these teams have sustained into this week. Tempo Storm had quite a drastic draft.
I like
change
that.
up.
Let's go with drafting.
They've had a drastic change up.
And a word was born.
Yes, because Fury is picking up Malthael, and that seemed to open up a lot of different opportunities for them in the drafting. We saw Cawthon Luck return to his Falstad. It's been an absence for a while. Playing a lot of that, we had more first pick Genjis, which has been a priority for them, but had fallen away in recent times. And then Superstars, they brought in Stray.
Yes, Superstars brought in Sray, which is, again, it's hard to gauge whether or not that seems to be a strength or a weakness here for the roster. I can't tell if it's internal conflict going on, so much so that is why they went with Daihu, or in fact that, you know, they just, Sray was gone and they used Daihu for those 2 weeks. Either way, the biggest thing here for me is, what do we see out of Tempo, and how aggressive are they into the earlier stages of the game? I talked about the aggro that they displayed 2 series ago. I don't remember which opponents. Yeah, versus Space Station. Absolutely cutthroat. 3-0 come from them. And then again, Lag Force with the sub. Suddenly you go to game number 5. I think Iacona put it best. Tempo Storm right now feels like a coin toss, and it's just going to be which version we end up getting from them today. I hope it's the more offensive one. I really do, especially with Fury making the changes, because a lot of the teams who have made that role swap with that off lane has been for shot calling and decision making. And when we saw Fury onto the Malthael on the side role, playing a non-warrior for the first time in his competitive career, Tempo had, in my opinion, some of the most passive laning situation I've seen. So it's kind of strange that they're making that change, reverting back, or making a different change for the different reason, but it's causing a worse problem. It's very, very kind of backwards towards what other teams are doing in North America. 2
teams in flux for this series. Let's check in with the cheers, starting with Superstars. Super Dave! Gosh, I love that name. It's the top cheer for Superstars. But we still have a lot of names that we recognize. Rambo version 1, EU is Garbo, Juna, XP, and Lil Helper. But for Tempo Storm, Gladman, we knew he'd be up there at the top.
If you were to, I was trying to find a way to like swap some of the letters in some of the names to make a cooler one. Like, you know, you take the Gladman, you got Mladgan, right? Something like that. But not a single one of those really even kind of worked whatsoever. I'm sad. I'm sad. We got EU as Garbo again, which is, you know, I'm just going to say it as many times as I can, mainly because
there's nothing that anyone could do to retaliate. Yeah. That's the name.
That's just the it's not even a statement at that point. But, you know, everybody's got to get their jimmies all rustled up.
Let's get the jimmies rustled for game 1. Where's it going to be?
I'm guessing it's Battlefield of Eternity because
I've slipped and said Battlefield instead of Battleground.
Yeah, I wasn't going to call you out there, but decided I was going to. Battlefield of Eternity for Superstars, and Superstars picking it. That stands out.
I have so much to say about that in a second, but first, Cursed Hollow and Infernal Shrines bans, which means Tempo Storm is going back to their previous Battleground ban of taking out Infernal Shrines. Battlefield of Eternity as a choice is not normal for Superstars. All of Phase 2, they do not choose. But for some reason, they have a winning win rate on it. 3-1 on Battlefield of Eternity. So I sat down today and was looking at the stats for both of the teams, and I thought maybe this would be a place for Superstars to start picking it, because we know Tempo Storm's probably not going to. Yeah, Tempo doesn't ban it anymore, but they also don't really pick it. They just feel like, if we have to play on it, we can play on it now. So I'm excited to see Superstars make this change and go to Battlefield of Eternity, maybe to get that first map win.
It is a really awesome adjustment from a team that did kind of feel as if, I don't want to say the hope was lost, but the morale had gotten too low, right? And still you see those signs of like the competitive drive kicking through here for the members, but so is the draft. ETC is banned out by the members of Tempo Storm. Tassadar is going to be dropped by Superstars. So where does the Medivh come into play? Superstars has a Medivh player for themselves, being Hosty, and so does Tempo Storm, as they have shown recently. But Genji is our first pick.
Tempo Storm seems to be fully on board with the melee death ball style of composition. They were playing it quite a lot in their last couple of series. but they haven't always shown a lot of aggression. That was your fault for them and our fault for them in the last series. And Superstars is a team that starts out in the early game fairly well, but then sort of falls off to the mid game. So hopefully if Tempo Storm does draft one of those styles of compositions again, they're able to keep that up in the early game, especially now that Superstars has drafted an Abathur, and try to just bring the aggression early on versus Superstars.
But it is apparent that Superstars is putting a lot of thought here into the draft phase. After the Genji's picked up, you never want to deal with an Abathur Genji composition, and so then you take the Abathur. How do you make up for that? Greymane accents the race, good hat target. They're putting the thought and effort here to slow down the momentum of Tempo Storm into the draft. So what else do we see from them? It's a little bit harder to kind of gauge the direction that I can assume Tempo Storm to go into, mainly because of, again, that role swap of Fury. I suddenly go, what can Fury play off on the side lanes? What is he able to get away with? And more importantly, what does Tempo value now with him? Because sometimes with that role swap, even though you objectively may have a different idea of what you want to draft, you just feel like that guy learning that role can't play that hero as well, or can't play up to snuff against their opponents, and you kind of pick differently because of that.
I almost thought that we would continue to see Fury pick Malthael. It's a great pick for Battlefield of Eternity. And I almost thought Tempo Storm was gauging these two series as a way for him to get practice with that hero. Honestly, Black Force and Superstars are all the way at the bottom of the standings. These should be wins for Tempo Storm, so it gives them an opportunity for practice with that hero. But at least in this case, maybe because of the Abathur pickup already for Superstars, they want to stick with having Dahaka. So they'll have Dahaka and then a strong support for Genji.
There's that Malthael ban. So what do we see for Superstars then? Not so sold on the fact that a fall stack could come out here, but I want to put it past the members of Superstars. If it does, it would mainly just be able to stall out for the Dahaka because that Malthael being banned out. You've got to be considering the side lanes and the soak, because Abathur, he is great at dealing with that late game. And Battlefield of Eternity is very much an early game map. Try and find a way to make up for that. They do pick themselves up a Lucio and a new Barak. No cross-supporting to aid that Lucio either. Makes me feel like that last pick has to be a Tyrael. But that's not Superstars playstyle.
They did pick it.
They
in their
one
last
time,
series.
and it was Urho on it, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was Urho. He looks pretty good on the Tyrael too, compared to most of his warriors. Actually, I remember being like, you know, for being a Tyrael being such a rare pick, I was like, where did this come from?
And why don't we see it more?
Why don't we see this more often? So maybe that's a little unfair. It just would provide that cross supporting and synergize with the Deathball comp that they already have, right? And that's why I feel like the Tyrael might be the direction they move into. But there's a lot of useful picks in that last slot. Arthas could be another.
Tempo Storm already has one global. Do they get Falstad here? Falstad has been such an emphasis for them, and Li Ming's already banned, Abathur's taken, so we're talking about Coffin Lux heroes, but no!
Interesting.
Cassia and Arthas.
It seems like they're assuming a major hyper carry here, but now Superstars, if they take a step back and don't commit to this Abathur Death Ball and focus more into that macro play, 2 melees, one of those is in fact your Dahaka. Genji is going to be looking for the ganks across the board. Cassia is pretty poor in that area as well. None of them can play the slow stall out pressure aspect of BOE. But to be honest, it doesn't feel like Lunar necessarily gives a big enough of an upper hand for Superstars to rely on that throughout this entire game. So it feels like Tempo Storm got a lot of what they want, a lot of melee death ball, and Superstars has got to find a way to slow down the pacing.
Exciting to see Tempo Storm be willing to still play Dahaka, even though they have obviously had a lot of priority in Malthael versus Black Force. But it kind of almost seems like they are appropriating Fury's heroes to being whatever is going to be a denial versus their opponents. Black Force plays a ton of Malthael, so they take Malthael a priority of the games there. And then versus Superstars, Superstars had a big problem with side soaking when they had anybody except Dahaka. It was a problem in the mid game where they had somebody who would just sit up in the side soaking lane, and then they'd end up sort of not like wanting to fight but not wanting to fight. They didn't bring them down, and so they just fell further and further behind, even though they were still theoretically soaking. So taking Dahaka from that does limit that slightly, but at least Superstars do have an Abathur.
Yeah, at least they've got the Abathur. It's just another case where we see a team where they are maybe lesser in skill, or at least their results have displayed that, and They are in a map that is very early game offensive. Death balls are typically very, very offensive and honestly forgiving strategies in the earlier stages of the game. Most melees have more hard crowd control, higher damage to make up for the lack of mobility difference between the two. Again, we have a baseline movement speed in Heroes of the Storm. That's why these trends do exist in that manner. And so it's just, can Superstars stall it out long enough to find a way to get the Abathur to come online and be a problem? I expect this to be, honestly, probably a pretty dominant game for Tempo Storm. But do you have a coin? No?
Gosh, I think
we forgot the tilt jar.
Yeah, I don't have pockets.
We'll get it later.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
all good.
all right. Let's get into the game. We've got game number 1 coming at you right now between Tempo Storm and Superstars.
And we're starting it here with Sray on the Abathur. In the blue is Superstars. Hosty on Lunara. We've got Yoda repping the Greymane. Iakona's on Lucio, and we know Urho is going to be on the Cyberbug. A new Barak. I forgot his name for a second there. Not Urho's, but a Noobs. That's rare that happens.
For Tempo Storm, June's playing Rhaegar. Fury will be playing Dahaka. Cothenlock playing Cassia. Genji will be played by Psalm, and finally Caterpillar will be playing Arthas. And remember, we did talk about some lack of aggression in some of the games versus Lag Force for Tempo Storm, but this is where Tempo Storm got a extremely dominant level 10 Immortal finish the game fast victory versus Lag Force to close out the series. Tempo Storm has had so many highlights of very great aggression and just complete dominance over their opponents. It happened on Dragonshire versus Space Station 2. So just depends what version of Tempo Storm we see here, but against that Abathur, I expect them to try to do exactly what they did versus Lag Force.
I expect them to try and concentrate on that as well. And we do talk about, we use the word passive, and I feel like maybe for a lesser experienced viewer, they view that as like, what are you talking about? Tempo Storm's getting kills in the laning phase. They're doing things through the later stages. And what we mean by the tone of passive, it's more the proactive decision-making and the rotations. Are they being more reactive to your opponent? Are they ones dictating the pace? And more importantly, are they well thought out? And if they have both of those factors, they're proactive and they put a large amount of consideration. You're winning in the one lane you're leaving, you're going to be winning, and it's probable to receive the gank elsewhere. It just felt like it was more, Tempo Storm was constantly reacting to their opponents. When they're a team who, when they choose to be aggressive and at the forefront of the map, they very much are the ones, they can make it look so very good. And so it's just, can we get that version out of them today?
I hope so. We've got the Immortal phase spawning in 13 seconds. As it's been a fairly slow early game, nobody really stepping out too far in either direction.
Which I would put the burden of execution in that pressure early game onto Tempo Storm. Again, that's against an Abathur composition. You would assume they need to be the aggro. And this is, again, them being passive. Yes, they are moving around, but they aren't necessarily giving that much effort and concentration to try and force Superstars to make a mistake anywhere. They've got a long while, though, so it's okay. It's okay for now.
They're sitting in defense posturing, but they've got Dahaka who can hang out up in the top lane now. Psalm's going to start feeling out for where the members of Superstars are.
Cattle's completely split. I thought that might be enough after walking over top of that mine. Hosty, though.
Nice. Nice Swift Strike from Psalm. Does a lot of damage to Hosty, forcing out Amp It Up from Iacona to heal him up. And that keeps Superstars. They had pushed back Cattle and wanted to make the rotation up to start doing some damage to the Immortal, but because of Psalm, Superstars had to retreat back to their Immortal.
This is a bit of an awkward situation for Tempo Storm. They want to defend with their composition. They have the Genji Arthas and they're posturing around defensively, but it doesn't necessarily help them. Yes, Dahaka is an advantageous 1v1 into an Abathur, but any hero could be really listed there and it'd be a winning trade. Abathur can't hold his own into 1v1s effectively. So, that mine, he's going to live, but barely.
There was another one there. Psalm lives, has to go back. Several members of Tempo Storm fairly low in health, and June being zoned away from the Immortal, from Tempo Storm, from Hosty.
But look at this. This is exactly what Superstars wants. They want this game to make it to level 10. They aren't necessarily worried about not winning the objective. They're just worried about stalling out the map objective, not letting Tempo get that early, colossal, disproportionate early game snowball that they typically aim for on a map like BOE.
Yeah, and Hosty and Yoda have been very cautious in the way that they approach throwing out the poke that they can with cocktails and with the poison damage. Noxious Blossoms of Hosty. Superstar step forward again. Psalm fairly low. Airho dives on top of Cothenlock. He is caught, but Airho will go down at the same time.
Saw him falling pretty low. I don't know if Hosey had the dot to be able to get the kill. He will start the channel on back. I think he will make it. 10 more seconds before a noob comes back to life. Halftime show is going to be kicked off. Tempo Storm is yet to do very much, at least not significant damage to the Immortal at all. They do not have much of an experience advantage, and this is into an Abathur composition. They have been so macro-focused, but they are yet to really gain an advantage through their efforts.
Yeah, this is the easier positioning to attack and finish off an Immortal, so there really wasn't too much that Tempo Storm could do to stop Superstars. Fury was there to slow things down and give time to Tempo Storm to take some of the shielding off. But huge is a great word to describe the amount of shielding that this first Immortal has for Superstars. Granted, it is the first Immortal, so it won't be able to do that much, but it's still a lot, especially, again, as we consider the composition of Superstars.
And Tempo Storm, with their failure to keep that pressure up through that Immortal phase, we might have a Mule be picked up there at level 7, which could restore some of the lackluster pressure they've applied to those front walls. Talking about front walls, though, this top one is not long for this world. Already removed. Shielding on the Immortal, still at 25%. Urho kind of posturing around, fishing around to see if he can get any crowd control to connect, but the Impale not there. He goes in with a burrow charge.
Very deep to Cottonlock, gets blinded from it. Caterpillar way up, leading the charge as Fury comes in. He wants to join. It gets hit from the Impale.
Nice boop from Iacona, keeps him alive. The hat is there. Genji throws out the shurikens. He's going to be locking in that kill for Tempo Storm, but they lose a 4.
Is ceaseless in his pressure that he's been applying, and they now have 7, so he's going to do a lot more with this poison. The fort goes down. Superstars take out a fort of Tempo Storm. They're very close in experience.
We do see the members of Tempo Storm going into that Death Coil build, which may indicate a Syndragosa, but that's normally into a composition where you're winning.
Be still, my beating heart. Don't you dare try to get my hopes up, Dreadnought.
I mean, you know, we don't always see it, but it could. That's what it means. You know, it's more likely to be a Syndragosa.
That's true.
It's just scary considering Tempo. Normally, if, you know, I was with their composition, what I would expect to see is them right now about a half a fort. One fort at 0.5% of HP and the other one sitting about without a front wall, right, is what you could assume them to get. And then the Syndragosa comes on. They're getting major objectives. They're getting a major objective, and it's called June.
Oh, my. Superstars round the bend and find a wolf. Take him down. Dahaka still pushing the top lane as best as he can. But Tempo Storm having a rough go at it in game number 1 versus Superstars.
Superstars winning an early game on Battlefield of Eternity here with an Abathur composition. Things, I mean, it just many times against the top of North America, it does feel consistency has been such a constant focal point here. And the coin toss that Iacona was referring to, that Tempo Storm seems to be displaying, at least for right now, in reference to the good or the bad version, it feels very much like this is the bad version being displayed so far from Tempo. But maybe once the heroics come online, the team fight will be different.
Yeah, once they have Ball Lightning, I think it'll be Ball Lightning. Army of the Dead, Arthas can sit for a lot longer, and Dragon Blade is going to be gigantic for Tempo Storm. But Superstars, the one area to worry about, long gone. Both of them neck and neck for heroic abilities. The Immortal phase just now starting. Things are so super amazing for Superstars.
And a little bit late on the camp, which is going to allow for a bit of free damage there. Hosty moves up, posturing around, gonna poke it down. I mean, what, that's about a free 3,000, 4,000 damage into that Immortal, and that's something Tempo Storm, now that the Abathur's post-10 stage of the game, they've got to be considering any advantage. The Bug does end up wearing that drag from Fury, though, so Brushstock gonna be completely wasted.
Cattleton caught, taking damage. Shrey uses the clone, forcing out Army of the Dead from Caterpillar.
That is a huge victory. As long as they force this fight, Cattle's really, really low. If you could bait the Ancestral immediate after, otherwise he's going to use all those ghouls, heal himself to full, and essentially it's just a cost of only one heroic choice. Heroic for heroic. Slight victory for Superstars considering the duration of time for that ultimate evolution, but beyond that, does feel as if the members of Superstars could have gained a bit more out of the situation. They're gaining something now, though.
They've got Thornwood Vine with Go for the Throat, so they're making sure that Greymane can finish off the kills from the poisons, and Thornwood Vine gives great poke for Hosty on the Immortal. It's already almost to the halfway point from Superstars, and this is the most difficult positioning, but because of the long range of that Thornwood Vine and using the ultimate evolution to draw resources, draw aggro, scare Tempo Storm to make sure that they dealt with it, but the flank is coming in.
They go on to Hosey, and he's going to be receiving way too much pressure. The Cocoon from Urho is going to be used onto the Genji. They've received the pressure. Ancestral does land on the Caterpillar. Things are good for the members of Tempo Storm, but they're going to back away here, try and recollect themselves. Cattle's completely Coffin's pretty darn low. Sray on that clone. My goodness, look at that Lunara poison damage. When it is amplified, she's one deadly Dryad.
Love the usage of these clones from Superstars, just focusing on the objective.
Yeah.
They are, granted they did use it when the fight broke out, but now making sure that they can get everything out of it, go in, force halfway to swap the positions, and Superstars are in a better position to try to finish off the Immortals. Tempo Storm have to come back in to defend, but it really feels like it's just delaying the inevitable, at least trying to get some kills so that if Superstars do get this Immortal, they can't push as hard with it.
That was a case where Superstars had an opportunity to all in on the Immortal and then take the fight afterwards, knowing it would be 100% shielding. They decided they weren't willing to risk the potential loss of a life, but now they've got to get this dance and kite around, poke away with that Lunara effectively. It's going to be on Hosey there, responsible for the 1.7K, but they've zoned out Psalm, June, and Fury. Maybe now is the time. Yoda decides it's going to be. He goes into Worgen form. Howling Blast connects with 2. Good Impale being sent out. Psalm goes right in with that Swift Strike, but he is punished heavily by the members of Superstars.
The cooldown timers way favor Superstars here. It is a problem for Tempo Storm. They go in aggressively, and if they don't get kills with things like Dragon Blade, Ancestral Healing being used, Superstars just have to wait a little bit longer, and then they're the ones who can reinitiate. Now we're looking at a 100% shielded Immortal barreling down the bottom lane toward Tempo Storm, and that fort is just about to go down even without an Immortal.
We also have to highlight the fact that we do see Tempo Storm with a Engageless Warrior composition into a Lucio composition. I will point that out anytime that I can because, again, base movement speed means that if Lucio is enabling everybody to move any percentile faster than the rest, the odds of you getting a disengage and negating damage, making up for damage, is huge. Talking about damage, though, there's going to be a lot here on Battlefield of Eternity.
Cocoon catches Genji, but broken out fast by Coffin Luck. Hasn't used Dragon Blade yet, so that is still a tool. Adaptation was the heroic ability and Army of the Dead. Cleanse.
Wow, that was a Genji going in, and he got super deleted. Dropping the sound barrier, Iacona and friends, they are speeding right through Tempo Storm. They are down 3 members here. The shielding on this Immortal is still at about 50% as they are marching to what is going to be the first keep of this game, but they don't have to walk away. They might go for game.
They used Dragon Blade.
They only have Ancestral.
Genji used Dragon Blade. There's only Ancestral here for the most part. There is Psalm now trying to do what damage he can, and now Coffin Luck and Fury show up. Shield is still there for the Immortal. Only now does it move into melee range, and look at the poke. Superstars are so composed.
Drag lands. Iacona is going to be under a lot of pressure here on the backline. Hosey is the main focus. Do they get the Genji? That is the biggest thing. No Ancestral, no Genji, and more importantly, the Rhaegar in the Cocoon, 77% onto the core. Gilly, this is it. Superstars has done it. They will be able to take game number 1 over Tempo Storm.
That freaking Cocoon. Good grief. Superstars. They came in controlled. They came in composed. They had synergy when they've only been playing with Sray with this roster for this week.
And they just did something that I've been honestly begging for, it feels like, when it comes to how to play a composition. The cooldowns you were talking about constantly. I always am highlighting the duration, R-button heroes and compositions and ways to play around them.
Yep.
They did it flawlessly. Using the clone to get the bait any of those cooldowns, using Lucio to get the disengage. Whenever things looked good for them, they were willing to, green means go in the world of Lucio, and everything just flies right through the members of Tempo. I absolutely adore that. That was very, I don't want to use the word innovative because it's a long-time strategy, but one that doesn't show up much in North America, HGC, and Superstars of all team is willing to rep it against Tempo in such a clean fashion.
Yeah, they had a lot of aggressiveness, willingness to fight, but the true tale was that they were able to get the first Immortal and stall out long enough on that first Immortal before getting it that there was absolutely no way that Tempo Storm would be able to, like, even if they got to 10 and had the Immortal there, it wasn't going to be the Syndragosa all in, we'll just finish the game right here that they would have wanted, which already was scary for them because they were up against an Abathur.
And I do want to say, you know, on the note of that kind of coin flip and talking about the results of Tempo Storm here and where they stand after that game with the laning phase, there was very few moments where we saw them try and be proactive. I'm very scared. You know, I said that in Lag Force when we saw that from them too, and it went all the way to game number 5. The fact that first one went over to Superstars, and Superstars looked, I mean, pretty controlled. Good. I mean, far better than they have in the past. I don't think they look Lag Force level yet, but I do think that they very much look close enough to be a problem for Tempo.
Yeah. Especially with that game 1 now going to Superstars. Tempo Storm, in losing game 1, generally has been picking Battleground choice. Let's see if that trend continues. We do have Dragonshire, and it is Tempo Storm, so there will continue the trend of, once they lose their first game, picking the Battleground. And that Battleground has shifted to be Dragonshire as their favorite.
And this is really the go-to map for the members of Superstars originally in phase number 1. They adored Dragonshire. They kind of were the Dragonshire OGs before it was cool, other than No Tomorrow, the only other ones that were comfortable picking that up. So I would say that this does still slightly favor Tempo because this is now their modern-day pick. But again, Superstars is one of the few teams willing to pick Dragonshire when nobody else would. So it's by no means are they uncomfortable. And really, Superstars looked best when, I mean, it's Ray on the JoJo with the 1-4 wave clear, right? Those are the comps that you knew Superstars to be. So I feel like Superstars got to be thankful that game 2 is there, especially after the momentum being on their side.
Who gets Dahaka? Who gets Malthael? My immediate question, what does the solo lane setup look like for these